It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Dozens of people are killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza as Benjamin Netanyahu vows to punish Iran for trying to assassinate him. See for yourselves. The Israeli military reveals new footage of the late Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar just hours before the 7th of October attacks on Israel. She slipped from my hand. A grieving father tells how he lost his baby girl trying to cross the channel. A vigil for Payne as one of the singer's former One Direction bandmates postpones his tour dates. Ministers explore plans to hand ownership of the post office to thousands of sub-postmasters. Plus, we report from Moldova as officials warn that Russia is actively disrupting a referendum on whether to join the European Union. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. We begin with the situation in Gaza, where dozens of people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in the past 24 hours. The attacks took place across the Strip as the Israeli military revealed tonight new footage which it says shows the former Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar just hours before a deadly 7th of October attack on Israel. An IDF spokesperson said Sinwar had planned the massacre for years in order to maximise harm to Israeli and Gazan civilians. Well, let's take you through the latest developments. Earlier today, a drone was fired from Lebanon at the Israeli Prime Minister's holiday home in the town of Caesarea. Neither Benjamin Netanyahu or his wife were at the house, and there were no reports of any injuries. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, 2 people were killed in an Israeli strike near the Christian-majority town of Junyeh, north of the capital Beirut. In central Gaza, at least 10 people, including 2 children, were killed in an Israeli strike on the town of Zaweda. Another strike killed 11 people, all from the same family, in the Al-Maghazi refugee camp in Deir el-Balah. And overnight in Jabalia, in northern Gaza, Israeli forces struck at least 3 houses, killing at least 40 people. In the last hour, there have been reports that dozens more have been killed in a strike on nearby Beit Lahia. From Jerusalem, Adam Parsons reports.
In Gaza today, fear, panic and yet more deaths. An Israeli airstrike hit this, the Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza. It's believed at least 12 members of the same extended family died here, and there were other deaths and other attacks. At the Jabalia camp, flames rolling out from a school. The camp's been bombarded by artillery for hours. And it's not just Gaza that Israel has targeted. This is Junyeh, on the edge of Beirut. 2 killed here as Israel continued its assault on its northern neighbour.
We could hear the sound of the drone. I was 3 minutes away from the strike. When I got here, it had struck. There were 2 people, a man and his wife, who were dead. Their body parts were everywhere, all the way to the police point there.
This is not one-way traffic. Israel says around 55 projectiles were fired into its northern towns from Lebanon. Nobody was reported injured, but a drone did land near this, a house owned by the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. There was no damage, and he seemed untroubled.
We're going to win this war.
So will something deter you?
No.
And all this in the wake of the death of the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, killed by Israeli forces. The Israeli military has now released footage of Sinwar and his family moving into a tunnel just before October 7th, the day of the attacks that he masterminded and which were the catalyst for all that has followed.
There were no hostages with Sinwar when he was eliminated. Killing Sinwar is the result of a year of operational and intelligence efforts to bring him and other Hamas leaders to justice. Sinwar has been eliminated, but our mission is not over. We will not rest until we bring all our hostages home, by any means possible.
Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, praised Sinwar as a shining face of resistance and declared that Hamas is alive and will remain alive. Khamenei doesn't just mourn Sinwar, he watches these fresh attacks and wonders when and how Israel will launch its missiles in Iran's direction. That attack is surely inevitable.
And Adam Parsons joins me now from Jerusalem. Adam, the death of Yahya Sinwar hasn't yet led to a ceasefire. And this latest footage of the former Hamas leader that's been revealed tonight by the Israeli military, what do you think that they're trying to achieve by releasing that footage now?
I think they're trying to do what they did in the first place. When they killed Yahya Sinwar, there are many here who thought that it was the crowning achievement of a year of effort. And they put out that footage that showed him in a room, and the Israelis felt that it cast him as a pitiful figure, trying to throw a stick at a drone and dying on his own. But across much of this region, perhaps around the world, it was interpreted as a very different way. It was seen as a man dressed in fatigues, wearing a Palestinian scarf, who, although terribly injured, clearly facing his death, his final act was one of defiance, throwing that stick at that drone. And for many, it has created almost a kind of legend status around that act of sheer defiance. I think the Israelis are aware that the narrative they wanted was not the narrative they've got. So they have now put out this footage, which they think demeans Yahya Sinwar much more. It shows him in the run-up to October 7th, the attacks that he orchestrated, as they would have it, hiding away in a tunnel with his wife, with his children, rather than being out with his soldiers. The IDF spokesperson, Aden Hagari, making a point of saying that when Sinwar was killed, it was the first time that he had engaged with Israeli soldiers during this campaign. So they are trying to take away some of the luster, trying to stop this man being portrayed as a heroic martyr, despite the rhetoric that we have heard, of course, from Hamas, but also from Iran, from Yemen, and from many Palestinian supporters around the world. Your initial point, though, will this killing, will Sinwar's death lead anywhere near to a ceasefire? Well, initially there were lots who said Hamas will now change direction. It will be more open to some kind of peace deal. There is frankly no sign of that. What there is the grimly familiar stories of death and destruction, whether that is in refugee camps that I was reporting on earlier, or whether it is tonight in northern Gaza, where Hamas says more than 70 people have died in this latest Israeli airstrike, which will, of course, keep the total spiralling. Hamas inspired health ministry says that the numbers now well north of 44,000 people who've died and somewhere around 100,000 people who have been injured in this campaign. You might think that with the global pressure to push for a ceasefire, Antony Blinken will be here later this week on behalf of the United States government. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, desperate for some kind of resolution before the presidential election, that there would be pressure to push us towards a ceasefire. And yet, as you have heard today from both Hamas and from Benjamin Netanyahu, there is, in a sense, a more sense of both sides wanting an absolute victory that realistically neither is likely to achieve.
Adam, thank you very much. The father of a baby girl who died in the Channel on Thursday night has told Sky News how he fought desperately to hold on to her. Aras Behes says Mariam, who was just 40 days old, was wrapped in a black bin bag to keep dry when he, his wife and 2 other sons boarded the overcrowded vessel in France for England. Rachel Venables has the story.
She was born on the move and killed on the journey. On Thursday, at just 40 days old, Mariam Behes was in her mother's arms, wrapped in a black bin bag to keep dry, on a migrant boat headed for England. But her father, Aras, told Sky News the packed dinghy soon started to take on water.
We all told the people in charge to please turn around, please turn around. We said don't go, but he did not listen to anyone and just sailed. Then the water got to my waist, my trousers were submerged in the water. Then the dinghy burst and I don't know how it happened, but everyone fell on top of each other and on top of me and my little girl. She went into the water, but I brought her up. Then a few others fell onto us, and then she went into the water and I brought her up for the second time. Then others fell on me, and then she slipped from my hand and fell into the water the third time. I lost her.
The French Coast Guard sent out several vessels and a helicopter, rescuing 65 people on board, but recovering little Mariam's body from the sea. Despite their tragedy, Aras still wants to get to England for the sake of his 2 surviving sons.
I will never try the sea route again, but I have come with the aim of getting to Britain so my children will have a future, and so I can feed my children. I want to work and raise my children like any other children.
It's been the deadliest year yet for Channel crossings, with more than 50 men, women and children killed so far, either by drowning or in the suffocating crush of those small, cramped boats. But in that time, 26,000 people have made the journey, like 20-year-old Salman, who arrived 4 weeks ago.
In Afghanistan, my community is being persecuted by the Taliban. We're being killed or forced to leave our homes. If my life was not in danger, I'd never have made such a dangerous trip.
And with the demand still high, smugglers continue to reap huge profits from those people who are determined and desperate to make it to Britain, no matter the risk. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
Former One Direction singer Zayn Malik has announced he's postponing dates on his upcoming tour following the death of his former bandmate Liam Payne. Fans have continued to pay their respects at Vigils this weekend following the death of the 31-year-old in Argentina. Liam's sister, Ruth Gibbons, joined her family's emotional tributes, describing her late brother as her best friend. Sky's Martha Kellner reports from Buenos Aires.
Surrounded by people on the loneliest of missions, Liam Payne's father thousands of miles from home, here to bring his body back to the UK. He visited the makeshift altar outside the hotel where his 31-year-old son died, accompanied in his grief by One Direction fans. How did it feel to see Liam's dad wandering around?
It was shocking, really shocking. Like, we never expected. I think that it's so hard because you lost your son across the world and in a country where you don't even speak the language.
He died alone, without his family, in a foreign country, without his girlfriend, without anybody. And that's the saddest thing.
Jeff Payne spent around 8 minutes here, stopping occasionally to put his glasses on, to read the tributes written in English, picking up pictures of his son and thanking fans for being here. Inside the hotel, Jeff walked the corridor to the room where Liam spent his final days. A policewoman stands guard. He's not allowed inside. This still an active investigation scene, but he did view a similar room. Investigators have been here too, reconstructing Payne's last day. Toxicology reports on Payne's body are expected in the coming days. In Liverpool, fans gathered at the docks to remember him, and one of Liam's 2 sisters, Ruth Gibbons, wrote an emotional statement, insisting she'll help take care of his son. "Liam is my best friend," she wrote. "No one could ever make me laugh as much as him. You just wanted to be loved and to make people happy with your music. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. Love you, oh how my heart misses you. One last time I need you to know, I'm here if you need anything. I drive to the end of the universe to bring you back." Payne's One Direction bandmate Zayn Malik postponed the US leg of his tour, which was due to begin next week. And around the world, vigils held to remember him. A boy from Wolverhampton who found stratospheric fame and discovered its pitfalls too. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Buenos Aires.
Sky News understands that ministers are exploring plans to hand ownership of the post office to thousands of sub-postmasters across Britain. The organisation is currently entirely owned by the state and receives an annual subsidy from the government. Our correspondent Dan Whitehead reports.
Former sub-postmaster Vipin Patel still opens his shop's counter every day. Now it's just his personal office. His wrongful conviction of stealing tens of thousands of pounds was quashed in 2020. He welcomes talk of post office ownership being transferred, but says it mustn't put extra risk on those still working on the front line.
It would be a good idea to change the model, provided the model works effectively with full governance and accountability and actually provides a good living wage for the postmasters.
Sky News understands the government has asked consultancy firm BCG to assess whether handing ownership to thousands of sub-postmasters is viable, with a report due in the coming months. Any plans to mutualise the post office are at a very early stage, and while there may well be appetite for wholesale change at the top, this is an institution that remains in crisis mode as it continues to deal with the fallout of the Horizon IT scandal. That includes the ongoing public inquiry, millions in unpaid compensation, and continuing IT issues.
I'm sure the Horizon scandal could have been avoided if the post office had been mutually owned. These concerns of sub-postmasters would not have been ignored. They would have been raised, they would have been addressed, they would have been dealt with. The Employee Ownership Association has detailed research that shows employee ownership works for everyone. It works for the business, it works for those who work in that business, it works for communities as well as the economy as a whole.
The Department for Business declined to comment on the reported plans. Any change, of course, comes too late for the likes of Vipin, who, despite being cleared of any wrongdoing, continues to wait for compensation. Dan Whitehead, Sky News, in Horsmouth, Oxford.
Thank you very much.
To Moldova now, where people are facing an era-defining vote this weekend. People in the former Soviet Union state, which borders Ukraine, will decide if it should join the European Union. There have been accusations that Russia is attempting to skew the outcome, but the Kremlin denies any involvement. Our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, reports now from Moldova.
90-year-old Luca remembers Moldova's time under Soviet rule fondly. It was good. Everyone worked here. No one left. Not like today, he says. This weekend, Moldovans will vote in a referendum on joining the EU. Polls suggest the majority are in favour. But not Luca. When it comes to Europe and Russia, he's clear where his loyalties lie. It will be better with Russia. Putin, he's the best person, he says. In the pro-Russian autonomous region of Gagauzia, where Luca lives, many feel closer to Moscow than the West. Europe will not be good for us, because in Europe there's nothing good, Luca's daughter Tatiana adds. But up the road we meet pro-EU Ivan. He hopes a yes vote will lead to more jobs.
Europa, 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 Europa.
But his wife says Russian propaganda and misinformation has rocketed ahead of the referendum and presidential election. I think 70% of people are zombies, she tells me, claiming Kremlin proxies are encouraging people to vote no or not to vote at all. Police seize money and tech linked to Russian-backed groups they claim bribed more than 130,000 people to vote against the EU. They also say this video shows Moldovans in Russia being trained to start riots. So these would be given in the street,
yes,
put in the doors. And on the edge of the capital, police show us a warehouse filled with seized anti-EU propaganda. This really shows you the level of organisation inside this alleged campaign to derail the vote. So as well as this huge pile of pamphlets, we've also got packets and packets of these, at least 100,000 leaflets telling people to vote no. And it doesn't stop there. Moldova's police chief says they're fighting an unprecedented project to spread fear and manipulate voters.
We are talking about over $15 million that was transferred in September for the purpose of corrupting or disrupting the democratic electoral process in Moldova.
Do you believe that the Kremlin and Moscow has a direct hand in this?
In terms of the actions and goals they follow, I think so.
While Moscow denies meddling behind the scenes, the pro-European president's been using more traditional methods to drum up support. Both sides know Moldovans are at an historic crossroads. One way leads back east, the other a new path west. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Moldova.
The Metropolitan Police have made several arrests after pro-Palestinian protesters blocked Tower Bridge earlier this evening. It's since been cleared. Earlier in central London, hundreds gathered in Trafalgar Square calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and denouncing Israel's offensive in Lebanon. Protests have become violent in Chile, where police have fired water cannon and tear gas at crowds in the capital, Santiago. People were out to mark 5 years since mass riots that shook Chile's political system. What began as demonstrations in 2019 over high transport fares descended into mass riots and a crackdown that led to dozens of deaths. Some electricity is flowing again in Cuba, according to the country's leaders, after a nationwide outage that's been going on for 2 days. Power plants failed earlier this week, leaving millions cut off. The government has suspended school classes, shut down state-owned businesses and cancelled some services to reduce pressure on the power grid. Time now to catch up on the latest sports news with Vishali.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
So Gunther, new book, Gunther Steiner, Unfiltered. So I brought the swear box along, just in case.
Have you got some money? Or like to put the money
Not much. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I did go to the end. At the end, you detail the phone conversation with Gene Haas, where he explains he's not renewing your contract. Now, that happens after a row between the two of you. Had you been more of a yes man, might you still have been in the job now?
Yes, for sure. If I would have just been always, yes, let's do this, let's not do this. But I couldn't see where the team is going by where he wanted to go. And that frustrated me, you know. So obviously, if I would have said yes to everything, I would be still there and be unhappy. So I'm gone now, but I'm happy.
In a way, you were at loggerheads. It
exactly,
makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
There's been some litigation. There's probably not a lot you can say about that. But what about your relationship? Is there one anymore? You and Gene?
You know the answer. There is not a relationship. Because people ask, what is the relationship? There is none, you know. Yeah. So that's the easiest answer, you know. So obviously, I don't want to get into my court case, but they sued me for the first book.
That's been dismissed.
That has been dismissed. So hopefully it stays dismissed. But you never know.
Had you still been in the job, would you be enjoying the kind of results that the team are getting now? Can you be confident about that?
The car was made last year, and a lot of credit goes there to the team which did it, to Simone Resta, which now is at Mercedes, you know, at the time. I mean, we sat down last year in June and made the decision that the car was born in the beginning of the year. And I found strange beginning of this year when it was said, last will be last, you know. It was like, I think you're wrong. So we were confident that the car will be in the midfield.
But in the virtual world, these two are definitely backmarkers.
We're off. While we're on the subject of unfiltered, should drivers be filtered?
I cannot look at you at your swear box.
What do you reckon to all of this? Is Verstappen right to take a stand against the FIA for this punishment he's had or not? What do you think?
My opinion there is, I think what Max said in the press conference, was it right? No. Was it wrong? No. He described how he feels about the car, you know, which, and used the F word, you know. So obviously in the race you cannot, I think if you start to prohibit this in the race, it's almost impossible because the TV takes it out anyway with the bleeping, you know. So I think the penalty was too harsh, and what it started off, a big controversy about it. He could have dealt in a different way with it.
What about the style of leadership of the FIA president, Mohammed bin Sulayem? Is he too in people's face? Is he too confrontational?
I think sometimes there would be better ways to handle some of the problems there are. You know, it's like just maybe speak with the guys more direct instead of speaking with them by giving them fines, you know. Just sit them down, they're all good guys. And I mean, Bin Sulayem was a driver himself before, so he knows how these guys think when they are competing. You know, they are very competitive, and sometimes, you know, you say something you don't really want to say. It's just an emotion and the adrenaline getting out of your mouth, you know.
Good, so you've beaten me. I'm prepared to say that. And you didn't swear. Yeah. Fair enough. Which you don't usually on the pit wall, but you have on Drive to Survive. So I'm going to offer you the chance to atone for some of those swear words by putting some money in the swear box.
I give you some money. Good old Scotsman needs some money, you know, so...
OK. It's all for a good cause. We'll make it go, yeah.
Would this be a chance for revenge? Maybe not.
OK, we're going to play this reactions game. You can answer questions while I do this, and I'm going to ask you about this season. All right. Who's going to win the Drivers' Championship?
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Let's take you to Sydney now, where after a rest day, the King and Queen plan to be out and about for the beginning of their royal tour. It's their first major trip since Charles's cancer diagnosis and his first as Australia's head of state. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock is in Sydney for us. And Laura, what have they got planned for today?
Well, this is the first time we'll have seen the King and the Queen out and about in public since their arrival late here on Friday evening. Yesterday, of course, was the rest day, the down day, very much factored in to allow for the King's health. Ahead of the engagements, though, the palace has issued a new photo of the couple, which was taken on Friday evening with a short message accompanying it saying, what a backdrop after a rest day at the beautiful Admiralty House today. Their Majesties will begin their first day of official engagements in Australia. That photo taken just over on the other side of the harbour here, Admiralty House being the official residence of the Governor-General. So today, they're starting their Sunday with a service. They're going to St Thomas's Church in North Sydney, going to the service there. It's an old church. Afterwards, there will be a walkabout, the first chance for members of the public to see and meet the King and Queen. After that short walkabout, the King is then heading to the Parliament of New South Wales, where its Legislative Council, its upper house, if you like, is marking its 200th anniversary. There's a reception there. He will address the guests who've been attended there, make a few short comments, we're told, before meeting up again with the Queen, where they will hold an audience first with the Governor-General and then with the Governor of New South Wales. So that's both the King's national representative in Australia and his local representative too. And then that is it. So that takes us up to roughly lunchtime, and that is it for the day. So you're getting a real sense of how this trip has been altered to factor in, to allow for the King's health. And then on Monday, they will be heading to the capital, Canberra. Gillian.
Laura, thank you. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political commentator, Benedict Spence, and the journalist and author, Christina Patterson. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Sunday Times. Its headline, Sir Chris Hoy reveals he has terminal cancer. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we are to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world? Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West. Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News? Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Benedict Spence, political commentator, and Christina Patterson, journalist and author. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, six-time Olympic gold medalist Sir Chris Hoy has revealed that he has terminal cancer and has been given 2 to 4 years to live. That story's on the front of the Sunday Times. On the front of the Mirror, Liam Payne's sister's tribute to her brother. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. Ruth Gibbons' moving open letter also appears on the front page of The Sun. The Observer claims the Chancellor will tax businesses to plug a £9 billion gap in NHS funds. And according to the Telegraph, millions of people will receive smartwatches to track blood pressure, glucose spikes and monitor how cancer patients are responding to treatment in an attempt to treat more patients at home and take pressure off the NHS. On the front of the Mail, a new poll that shows more people think the Conservative Party are more reliable looking after their families' finances than Labour. The Sunday Express leads with Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick, saying if pensioners freeze to death this winter, the Prime Minister will be to blame after cutting the winter fuel allowance. The Daily Star features the World Conquer Championship winner sharing his relief after being cleared of cheating. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Benedict Spence, political commentator, and Christina Patterson, journalist and author. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the Sunday Times front page and this very sad story, revelation from Sir Chris Hoy, that he has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. We did previously know that he had cancer, but he's now been told that he has between 2 and 4 years to live. Just so sad.
Yeah, it's very,
very sad. He's 48 and he's got 2 young children, and obviously for anyone getting a terminal cancer diagnosis is devastating. But what makes this even more tragic is that his wife, the mother of his children, has been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So you can just imagine this stress on that family. And he says in this interview, which I think is an extract from an interview probably in the magazine, that his greatest torment has been having to tell their children, Callum and Chloe. And yeah, I mean, it's just very, very sad. He said he's trying to remain optimistic and he has genuine moments of joy, but it must be agonising to know that you're not going to be seeing your children grow up. So, yeah, awful.
Yeah, just incredibly sad, as we say. Bendit, there isn't really much more to say.
No, there isn't. I mean, obviously everybody knows Sir Chris Hoy is sort of an individual in peak physical fitness throughout much of his life, and it goes to show that actually this can hit you no matter what kind of a person you are. It's not very fair, ultimately. It's one of the few things that in Western medicine, actually, we've made great leaps and bounds in is detecting and treating cancer in the last couple of decades. But we are almost playing catch-up because the rates at which people are developing it at younger ages, all sorts of more aggressive types of cancer than perhaps they would have done before. I mean, it is a real battle. It's a real fight. And examples such of this as people that you just wouldn't have thought would be the sort of person to get this sort of diagnosis. It's very sobering, I think. And as Christina says, a really unfortunate time all round for his family, what with his wife's very unfortunate diagnosis as well.
Yeah, no, our thoughts are with him, certainly. Let's look at a bit of politics now, shall we? Turn to the budget, the upcoming budget on the 30th. Much speculation, much leaking. We almost seem to know every word that's in the budget, we think, but we shall have to wait and see. But certainly tax rises, or tax freezes, but essentially tax rises, that's one of the main issues that has been thrown up. And also this, I guess, quid pro quo, that if there are tax rises, there will be more investment in the NHS. That might be the sugar that sweetens the pill.
There might be, although we're talking about 9 billion, as the Observer says on the front page, and the NHS's budget for next year will be about 190 billion at a conservative estimate. It's not a huge amount, and it's the sort of thing that I suspect actually Wes Streeting is probably being asked behind the scenes, can you also make that up in cost-effective measures in savings elsewhere? It's relatively quite a small uptake for the NHS. I don't think it's going to clear any of the backlogs or anything like that. It's certainly not going to improve the lot of many hospitals that are facing, dereliction in some cases, that need their IT systems updated. Lots of things need to be done in the NHS, and this won't really cut it. I suspect we'll probably see a separate plan developed at some stage over the next couple of years for that. But it's a really difficult balancing act that Rachel Reeves is sort of having to do here, because Labour has come out and said, we understand growth is what is needed ultimately long-term to fund a lot of these things, be it public services or to bring down the tax burden on people. But there is no doubt that with the tax burden as it is at a record high in the post-war period, and the prospect of more taxes to come and no immediate uptick in lots of other services beyond the NHS, there's no other word for it. It's a new form of austerity. It's the thing that I think they absolutely did not want to do, but sort of facing down the barrel of the gun on this, and it just sort of hits everybody, be it the end of the winter fuel credit for some pensioners, be it the removal of exemptions for farmers in terms of passing on their land, which some people say that's a way of sort of avoiding paying inheritance tax, but a lot of farmers rightly point out, well, we're not making any profits at the moment, and this will mean farms go out of business when the older farmers die and they want to pass it on to their children. It's an incredibly difficult situation. Those are just sort of two examples. We could go into many more. It's the Observer says that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is staking her reputation on this, and I think that's an understatement right there. Labour have come in right off the bat. They've promised a more sort of mature approach to politics, and they are going to be raising people's taxes and not necessarily improving the public services in the short term. Keir Starmer came out straight away in his first week and said, "Look, it's going to take more than 5 years to sort these things out." Will the public have the patience for that? That's what we're going to find out.
Well, the article suggesting that Rachel Reeves is understood to believe that the public will accept a multi-billion-pound hike in business taxes if that is linked to repairing the NHS.
Yes, they've commissioned some research from a think tank called Labour Together, which is a poll of 6,000 people. So it's not a tiny poll, but it's not a massive poll either. But I mean, I think the thing is, if you say, should business pay more tax so that the money goes to the NHS, I mean, who's going to say no? You know, nobody thinks.
Yes, you kind of need to see the question.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be, because although Labour made a promise that they weren't going to increase taxes on so-called working people, and there are many angels have danced on pinheads in defining what a working person is, since most people have to actually work to pay the bills. The challenge is that for small businesses, for example, raising national insurance will affect working people, and also people who run small businesses are also working people. So there are absolutely no easy answers in this, and I think what the whole shenanigans, actually, since Labour have been elected, and I support Labour, and I was delighted that they, won the election, and I think it's a nightmare for anyone, and I'm pleased that they are in power, but there are no good options for any government at the moment, and so it really is a case of finding the least bad option, and yeah.
And Benedict, the Sunday Times talking about the £1 billion inheritance tax raid as well, also predicted.
Yes, and this, of course, touches upon the agricultural relief that is potentially going to be got rid of, amongst other things. But it's a curious thing.
Just to say that you did talk about farming families. Family farms are will be exempt, apparently.
Not entirely. Not entirely. The devil is in the detail. That's always the problem, of course, isn't it, with these things, is that there were some people who are going to sort of win as a result of this, but far too many farms are in far too dire financial straits that actually lots of them probably are going to end up having to sell up either way. But, I mean, one of the curious things about inheritance tax is it's always been sort of painted as this something, that's very unpopular amongst most members of the public, but is only paid by a very small portion of the population, whereas lots of people have this idea that lots of them pay for it. But as wealth has been accrued over time and property values have gone up, more and more pensioners find themselves living, not particularly wealthy existences, but in properties that suddenly creep over the threshold. Their assets suddenly are encapsulated by that. I think about a third of pensioners, certainly by the end of this decade, are expected to live in million-pound households. That is a great store of wealth that the government is obviously going to be eyeing up. But it's one of those things where they possibly don't need to change the rules around inheritance tax at all. One of the things that they are talking about doing is extending the gift period from 7 years to 10 years, so that you have to sort of give give away your property or your money to somebody 10 years rather than 7 years in advance to not have to pay inheritance tax on it. Will that make that much of a difference? I'm not so sure. It's a tax that I think, through the process of just drag, if you like, of the inflation of value of property, is going to end up making the government a lot of money in the short to medium term anyway. So, will it go down particularly well amongst members of the public to hear Labour saying we're going to increase the net on inheritance tax? Possibly not. And they probably didn't need to do that anyway, seeing as so many households are about to fall into this criteria.
But it is worth noting that the plans for inheritance tax will particularly hit aristocrats who own 30% of the land in England. So I'm not sure how unpopular that will be as a move. And the other thing to mention here is that this is about business relief, people who bought property through businesses. So it's not actually affecting, for most people, there's no change, according to this.
Yeah, so it's about the reform of business relief.
When it comes to the subject of aristocrats with lots of land, who do they end up selling that land to, and for what purpose? If farmers are also very much up against it, a lot of this is agricultural land, they're not necessarily in a position to be buying more. What a lot of this land will end up being bought up for is either property developers who will sit on and speculate on the land until we actually improve planning laws so that they can start building houses more easily, or by hedge funds, which is happening rather a lot in the UK and is happening a lot in the US, that those who already have catastrophic amounts of money are going, ooh, people are having to sell land. Now is a great time to buy land because they're not making any more of it.
More bad news for the government in the Mail. Voters are saying that they don't trust Labour with their money.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't really expect a Mail front page to say British public absolutely delighted by impending Labour budget. It doesn't give the details of this poll, but I mean, I think what they have discovered, the Labour government have discovered, is that governing is incredibly hard. I mean, much, much harder than any of them dreamt it would be. And I actually think this policy of delaying the budget and having this sort of drip, drip, drip of agony has been a mistake, because now the whole country is frightened to death. And of course, you know, their big promise was about delivering growth, economic growth. Well, it is. Now, there was this investment summit on Monday, and apparently that went pretty well. And what's his name? Bloomberg, the guy, Bloomberg, what's his name? Michael Bloomberg. No, what's his name?
Yes.
He has spoken about this being. He has spoken about this being, you know, a great time for businesses in the UK and with some stability and so on. So the picture is not all completely miserable. But I think this drip, drip, drip of impending doom isn't really helping anyone. So I can't wait to get the budget over, and I hope that they manage to make it slightly less miserable than we're currently expecting it to be. And then everyone might be delighted. Who knows?
Maybe that's the intention, to get all the bad stuff out now and then pull that massive rabbit out of the hat. Benedict, we're going to have to leave it there for the moment. After the break, there'll be much more to speak about. Thank you both for the minute. Coming up on the front of the Telegraph, with Robert Jenrick saying he would tear up the Climate Change Act. Do stay with us for more.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Benedict Spence and Christina Patterson. Let's take a look at the Telegraph. This very interesting article on the front page. Robert Jenrick saying that he'll tear up unconservative Climate Change Act. He said he'll scrap major pieces of Blair and Brown era legislation, including the Climate Change Act, Equality Act and Human Rights Act, under a Great Reform Act, if he makes it to number 10. Christina, thoughts?
Yeah, he is determined.
Not a tearing up that he's going to be doing, isn't there?
He's becoming more and more Trump-like, actually. It's quite strange. Actually, no, more like J.D. Vance.
I was going to say, Trump's got a sense of humour. I've not heard Jenrick crack a joke.
Jenrick is totally untroubled by a sense of humour, and it seems determined to drag us back to 1862. So any acknowledgement, for example, that there might be any kind of a climate emergency, clearly that gets pushed out of the picture. Any sense that you might want to make any kind of progress in terms of equality in this country, that gets torn up. And, of course, any nasty foreign court that might want to protect human rights, that gets torn up. So hard to know what he won't tear up. The idea that he thinks, since we have just, in case he hasn't noticed it, had a very big Labour majority, the idea that he thinks these policies will be popular with the majority of the British public, it's completely for the birds. He is... I mean, I'd be delighted, absolutely delighted if he became Tory leader, because I think it would hugely reduce the chances of the Tories winning the next election. And they have a mountain to climb anyway, given Labour's electoral majority. But he's gone... I mean, nobody seems to have any idea what this man believes, because he has changed his views with every single Prime Minister he has served, or rather not served, because I think what he's really served, and is currently serving more than anything, is his own ego. He just makes it up as he goes along, and he's shifting from this kind of, you know, centre-ground guy who was apparently pro-Cameron and pro-Boris and pro-whoever, and now he's just pro-him, but nobody knows what he believes, and that is a pretty bad sign, I think.
Is he a shapeshifter, Benedict?
You know, I think he is. I've got to be honest. I think he's saying what he can to sort of pander to the Tory right, but also to pander to Tory members and voters who may have gone to Reform in a sort of a bid to say, look, I can still appeal to you as well. Don't go over to Nigel Farage, come back to me, and we'll all be one big happy family. Whereas Kemi Badenoch has, in the past, she has actually drawn the ire of a lot of, certainly more Brexiteer Tory MPs for refusing to just go gung-ho and start ripping up former EU laws and stuff, just sort of, you know, as and when. Actually, I think I can't remember which MP it was that she had some rather sharp words for at a select committee when she said it's not actually in the best interest of the country to throw the baby out with the bathwater just because that's what you would like us to do. I think, let's say hypothetically that there are issues with all of these things that Robert Jenrick has identified and that they could all be updated or changed. OK, great. What is the alternative? That, I think, is, you know, you can say these things to the sort of Tory members, we're going to rip up this, we're going to leave that, and they will all go, yes, fantastic, this sounds great. How do you then transform that into a message to go to the country more broadly, which is not necessarily in favour of ripping up all of these things, without an alternative already in place? This is what I don't ever hear from Conservative MPs who want to go down this route. What is it that you plan on replacing these bodies with? We should actually have that conversation. If you want to be taken seriously, you need to give voters a viable alternative. You can't do what we have done in the past with certain other rather important decisions, go, well, we're just going to do this thing and we'll figure out the details later. Yeah. That doesn't tend to work out particularly well.
There's going to be a great
yes,
reform.
Exactly.
There's going to be a great reform act.
What is it involve? It sounds great.
That's what it's called.
It's going to be a brilliant reform.
It also sounds like another political party.
Yeah, but also, what about, I mean, on a serious note, Northern Ireland, you know, that is completely ruined if we tear up the European Convention on Human Rights. That goes. So
itty-bitty details, according to Robert Jenrick. It'll all be fine. It'll all absolutely be fine, I'm sure.
Interesting. Just very quickly, who are you two calling it for the leadership?
I think it's going to be Kemi Badenoch.
I really do fear that it won't be Kemi Badenoch. I think it might be Robert Jenrick.
Interesting. We shall see.
Oh, well, let's hope it's Robert.
OK, let's talk about some American politics now, shall we? The Observer have Vice President Kamala Harris pictured on the front page. She's out there doing the interviews, holding rallies. She's described Donald Trump as being a little bit shy of recent times. He's not been doing interviews. He's been turning them down, and she's really calling him out for that.
He's done a few interviews, but they've not been quite as high profile as hers. And I think actually she's also trying to draw attention away from the fact that her campaign, I think, is feeling a little bit jittery. There was the Call Me Daddy podcast that actually, you know, it didn't go down particularly well because it's not a good idea to laugh at working-age men who might be drafted and sent to the South China Sea in the next couple of years. That, you know, that was replayed by right-wing social media posters ad nauseum, and it has not done her any favours. There was the suggestion that she might even go on Joe Rogan as a sort of an immediate reaction to the understanding, oh, I've made a bit of a mistake here. But really, what we have to just focus on right now is the polls, and they are really quite narrow. I think I saw two today, the latest ones, put her between 1.5 and 2.4 points ahead nationally, with Trump ahead in several really key swing states. If you put the shy Trump effect, which has been a thing the last two elections, if you feed that into the matrix, I wouldn't bet on her winning right now. That's the thing. And quite
I mean the voters that won't admit that they are going to vote.
Those voters, and it's happened twice, where people have said it's not going to be this, and then, oh my word, it's quite a lot more. If this happens a third time, which we have no reason to believe that it wouldn't have, she's in a lot of trouble, frankly. And I think that a lot of this high energy that you're seeing from her now, and trying to paint Donald Trump as being very low energy, is a reflection of that.
OK. Bandit and Christina, we must leave it there. We've run out of time, but very, very interesting. Let's take a look at the weather for you now. Well, Storm Ashley will bring heavy rain and widespread gales tomorrow, with 80-mile-an-hour gusts likely in the northwest and damaging waves on the coast. The Met Office has an amber warning for disruptive winds over western Scotland tomorrow, and more widespread yellow warnings into Monday. Ireland has amber and yellow wind warnings too. There'll be a technically mild but very windy start to the day, with prolonged rain over Northern Ireland, the east of Ireland and much of western Britain. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, dozens of people are killed after the latest Israeli strikes on Gaza.